Well, this is more casual. This is really like family hour today, so it's great. In fact, it's so much so that I will lounge. Yes. What? That better? Are you rolling, Miss Pinto? Thank you. We're on. You're all being videotaped, and this will be passed over to the Trump administration over here. They're collecting, outliers. Business first. John, you're reading at MIT a week from today?
A week from today,
What time?
3 in the afternoon.
Oh.
MIT bookstore on Mass Ave.
Cool. Which is, it was actually, the time I've been in there for reading, it was pleasant to sit there. It was not, it was off out of the way, and the people treated the writers rather well.
I'm reading with a well-known sort of early language poet from California, Alan Bernheimer.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Sure.
wow. Fantastic. Very cool. Very cool. Good. At what time again?
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
3 o'clock. Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
They're gonna get tired, they're gonna leave.
You come at 3, I'll occupy you somehow.
There you go.
What? That's the only business we have right now. There's a possibility that I'm going to open up for one of the days of open studios here in Somerville, which would also be next weekend. And I will put the Duncan and Jess show back up, because I've got it all shoved underneath the thing, so that people can come and without all the chairs here and spend a little time actually being able to look at stuff. This is subsequent to making sure that the leak that's in the ceiling right now is at least stable, or it's not going to pour, because there was a lot of water in here this morning from the rain.
They can always bring an umbrella.
That's right, yes, it was very surreal. Today is, in many ways, a wonderful dream come true. When I first set the series up, there was a whole group of people that I wanted to bring forward who had been participants at the old Word of Mouth series that I ran in Cambridge. And when I say participants, I meant the people that emerged down there that also became friends, that were doing the kind of work that was pushing me around and questioning what I was doing in that wonderful way that only your friends can. And so Christopher Sawyer-Lauçanno was one of those people. He and his wife Patricia became dear friends. Godfather to my child, as I'm always calling him. So he's now my godfather. And
I think he's everyone's godfather.
Yeah, I hope so.
Padrinho.
I'm the padrino.
But amongst us, us poets here in Somerville on Oxford Street, one of the things that has always gone back and forth is that of all the poets running around here in the Boston area, the person that has the most immense breadth of activity and the kind of impact on us that really makes a difference, and a gentility, is Chris. The breadth of it is ridiculous. It runs from biographies of Paul Bowles, biographies of E.E. Cummings, in which I am footnote. I paid for that footnote. And the beautiful book Continual Pilgrimage, plus his own poetry, plus translations from Lorca, Alberti, on and on and on. And very much like our dear Garrett Lansing, to sit in Chris's house and mention somebody, you generally get, well, when so-and-so and I were together, wherever it was, and you go, really? And it's impossible. Only 2 weeks ago, we sat here and he got up to do a lecture at the Duncan, and then began talking about how his mother was quite involved with Kenneth Rexroth. Now, I've known you for nearly 30 years and never heard this story. And I was sitting, it's all one can do as you're sitting in the chairs, go, what? Why haven't I heard this one? And through Christopher, I meet John High. And John came to Chris's house and read there, had no idea who he was. I knew that Talsman had published his book, and I don't think I'd even seen the book at that point. And I remember sitting there in the living room just absolutely stunned by the prosody that I was hearing. And when I finally got the books, and thank you, because when we saw each other last, you laid the 2 most recent books on me, it immediately became, there's many different classifications of work in my horrifying brain. Some of it is lovely, people are doing fine things, and it's great, I'm glad you did that. And then there's work far on the other side, which is just, it's so commanding when one reads it, that I'm sitting there trying to figure out how you're doing what you're doing. And that first poetry reading, I mean, it was just a breathtaking, feeling that, how did that line work? And then to sit with the books and to be able to go down to it. So he has quickly become not only a friend through Chris, but a poet that I would say, I'm studying. And in that way that I sit down and as prepping for this week, pulling up the books and just sitting there and watching the casual feeling of range. And boy, to get casual and range together to me is one of the great things that one can do. It's not easy at all, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful poetry. So it's great to have you both here. Thank you for Chris. I point to you and say Chris. John has made the trip out from New York. Chris has come in from Turner's Falls, as most of you know. So it's lovely to have you here. And they have informed me that instead of having the formal thing where I introduce one and then they read and then I introduce the next one, they're going to do a round robin and they're just going to read back and forth and just whip it out, gentlemen, as Sam used to say. Please welcome them both.
Get started.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming. It's really an honor to be here. I've been hearing about Michael and Isabella's series for so many years, and now that I have been invited, I really feel like I am somebody, and that I have to stop saying I could have been somebody, that I've really made it now, and it was just in the nick of time. Just in the nick of time, because I tendered my resignation at the university, and I'm leaving this country. So this will probably be my last reading here, at least for a while. Also auspicious because a year ago today, I and Andrea, a beautiful writer, wife and brilliant writer, found the temple outside Tokyo that was Patricia Pruitt's temple. And we had been on pilgrimage in China, as well as doing some workshops and readings and what have you. And following the famous Ehe Dogen's trail as a young man when he was in China and basically started what's called Zen in the 13th century before going back. And Chris, of course, called us, and beloved Patricia moved on to her next adventure. And he told us, he gave us some pretty meticulous instructions.
I did.
As to how to find this temple, and we still got lost. But it was just such an extraordinary, momentous occasion that would take too long to describe. It was so magical.
What do you mean Patricia's temple?
Her favorite.
It was her favorite temple, and so in my mind it's hers. It's her temple. And so today's reading is dedicated to Patricia, and so really very honored to be able to participate with my dear friend and Christopher and Patricia. And this is a poem that I wrote for Patricia. The wind blowing through the forgiveness of trees, we who are everything that we breathe, we who are everything that we're not. Going down to the earth in a bow of hallelujahs. Thank you for the words spoken and unspoken. And thank you for the wind on our backs. Thank you for your praise of the song.
You want this, John? You okay?
This seems okay. As long as it's okay,
Yeah.
I'll just stay with it. I threw my back out, so I'm gonna need to mostly sit. Maybe I'll stand up and dance with him later. I should not say anything else. The Book of Brown Leaves. Blue leaves floating on the water point to a face, Zoshan. The mystery of dreams sends a quiver in the boy. The leaves underlying a fear of life, forgiveness, of redemption, in the dream merging toward the lives passing through us. Yet something primordial in these voices, to rise up like a hand from the sea. We are. Shrouds of darkness surrounding these centuries of travel. It's a glimmer of what the Master refers to as the original face. A secret part of ourselves that has been buried like a castaway body in an empty boat. Trees everywhere. Book of brown leaves. Stones of hunger. Clearness of water. Like the whiteness of the sky wall guiding you and the monks to a source of the original breath. This crouching elephant waiting. This tiger entering the forest. The lost fingers of a hand. What will we name the face of God? The vastness of the boat on the water, figures of spirits standing on these cliffs and sleeping in these caves, sky, flower of sun. If you were allowed to give birth to the child again, for even a day, would the blossom of sun not still enter the eye? I see. I see you as a lost boy, Zoshan, wandering the forest without a family when I found you. At first, I thought you were the one-eyed boy I once was. But you were Zoshan, head monk of the monastery, only still a child full of blood and tears. This child is walking among the stones of the sea. At the edge of the waves, the boy views another child with one eye, then another, this glistening girl child with a mute voice, this one who will become his own mother when he himself becomes a child again in another life after ravage. He sees his father, and do you remember? The boy is frightened. He is blue in this book of brown leaves. Anxious. Why anxious? To enter the face of God. Awe. Because the boy is uncertain whether he really exists. If he can exist without love, whether anyone is here to care for him by the water should he drown for love. This is you, Zoshan. I carried you across the waves. His own father dead. His own mother lost in blood. The warlords who razed the village where Zoshan was born. Even as a monk, he will be unable to save them. Yet the boy wants to forgive. Wants to forgive their killers. The waves are not waves. I see you as a boy beside him, beside this one-eyed one, the mute girl hovering in the book of brown leaves.
Thank you. Thank you all. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Imogene, for the artwork. Thank you, John. Thank you, Michael. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start with a poem of Patricia's. I'm actually putting together, I've already put together two posthumous volumes. I'm now doing a big collected, I guess. And this is a poem that to me is extremely mysterious. I saw most of Patricia's work. This one was actually in a little chapbook. I have no idea when she wrote it, but it's somehow, it's an amazing poem. It's in 30 different pieces, very small. And I'll just kind of pause between them, called White Spaces. I'll give some white spaces. He penetrates the endless evening, at last beyond need, he wants for nothing. The hole worn in last year's yukata will not be mended. What of it? Nothing will ever end again. Tangible and intangible weave the fabric of absence. No mind, no being free to roam the universe. The weight in the heart, a white camellia fallen into a dark well, bones forever scattered. Facing forward, penetrating the bone. White days float away into smoke rising from the incense burner. In one instant, a new tool for measuring the days. Learning to recognize the footsteps of absence, to wonder where and when. The day wears a hole in the thin cotton of composure. Nothing to do with the sea. Over and over it vanishes. Close and distance hover in the evening dark. A new moon peeks out of the old darkness. Sadness is a blunt, thick wrap. It cannot shatter the stars. No sound of departure, no in, no out, no day, no night, no one's here. Sighs, not footsteps echo in the garden. Do the birds sing or make noise this morning? Depends on the ears listening. Birds fly up at sundown on Harimanada say, the water is calm. The day annihilates itself for nothing. Nothing out of the ordinary happens. Even spring comes with its cherry blossoms and purple iris. Wordless hands and eyes speak. Talk of necessary things, pour a cup of tea, only darkness shows through the night. The hole into darkness has infinite spaciousness, days and days of white flowers, friends come, letters, the space remains white and empty. Man to woman, father to son, friend to friend, everything ends. May butterflies fly into the void. Mute face suffering into the dark. Sitting in the Father's room you know and you don't know. Not to forget, not to wholly remember, pine trees stand in every season. Close as a passing shiver in the pine bough. Gone where? What is ever ordinary? Certainly not this. Incense wreathes the white chrysanthemums. Folded away with his suits, his voice, his look. The man in this photo, who's he smiling for? The smallest object has earned a new regard. His few habits, the letter opener, his favorite cup, to carry all the time forward in each moment, live in a house without walls. Son and mother form a double bond with infinity. In this morning's rain, things melt in air. Being, you are here. Not being, he is here. And that's White Spaces. I'm going to read another poem of Patricia's from a book that came out and was read here at Michael's, when did this come out? 2017. This is called Early with Quiet. Pine shadows lean on the silver wind chime. Snow in the mountains, snowfall in the mountains. Early with quiet. Death sits in a street vendor's cart with his wife and hordes of his children all eating apples. In the underground passage he accosts me. I refuse, but I hear the evening sun clot black red against the great wall. And when I lived on China Hill, I used to walk down to see the lights in the harbor. Everything grew in that garden. Don't forget Philomela. My Lord, what a morning when the stars begin to fall. Witnessed blue rainbows, Herring Cove Beach. I'm on the path, walking in the midst of others. I return alone. Mr. High.
So I started what you heard before, a manuscript called Scrolls of the Temple Sweeper. And I was trying to finish it.
It's just fucking amazing.
I was trying to finish it before Patricia left us. And so she and Chris were reading the scrolls. That when I read, I can see how many typos, how fast I was typing. And we're talking about a couple thousand pages, so it's a mess. But when Chris told me when we got up here that when she heard that Book of Brown Leaves, she said, here. And this was a book I wrote some years ago when my dear brother passed on. It turned into a series of books, but in any event. This was the poem. So that Chris said what I just read took her to. I'm going to read that. And this was, I think 2004. 2003, 2004. Dim, visible, sunrise now. Winter passing, all thoughts of gain passing. Snow vanished over rooftops, sphere of blue jays flying about. These dead seen and see migrating gulls from the sea, an albino crow walking, another life passing, a boy and monk by the fence, parting, earlier going up the stairs, heads shaven, a bucket of water in the boy's hands, hold me, hints of awe in the temple bell out there, rapture or ruin in the boy's one eye, and bore through hell. Voice curious in prayer, host meeting host, today laughing, saying farewell to mudslide shrines, the one-way street, a mouthful of wine. Don't identify with it. Whispering in the orchard outside, everything changes. Attention, you are with me now, here.
This is a book that came out quite a few years ago from Talisman. Basically started in India, ended up here, Rusuri, Montague, Miscellany. I'm just going to read the opening pages. For the time being in time, but also in place. Michael, thank you for the lovely wood stove. This is just great. What was my backside? For the time being in time, but also in place. Being is singular and plural, severally and in abundance. Days longer now, water drips from roof in precise intervals. An old equation thrust forward as if time, out of time, were not just a concept. Realize the motion, up, down, backward, forward. Nothing really in flux, though the balance is precarious. Excavation tango, digging into the past for the future. To name is to codify, also to destroy. I won't name this feeling. I do not wish to get to the heart of my mystery. Codification is conquest. Naming dissolves the enigma of not knowing. Only don't know, itself a kind of naming. He said he had decided not to write anymore for fear of understanding experience. Decipherment kills the sense of tongue on skin. We move to gather into ourselves the experience of living, the experience of being. I am here now in the here name. Which brings me to the clearing with the rock. I will sit here until just before sunset. Try not to give a name to where I am. There is only air on my forehead, sky, trees, waving blades of grass. Here in the mountains, I is not another. I is me, as the Himalayas are themselves. The mind wants to travel. The body wants to stop and sit on this rock in this clearing. The body wants only to inhabit this place. The mind wants to record it. Tapasya cannot be a momentary pursuit. Tapasya is practice. In the path forward is the path behind. In the path behind is the path forward.
Wow.
Back to you.
I didn't finish the book, but I have the fortune of having some of Patricia's notes here, and since this had a yes beside it, she cut large swaths of the manuscript.
She was brutal.
She was brutal. You're going to pull the wool over her eyes instead. And this one's called The Author and the Two Crows. When does the author become himself impus? The man is thinking now. The crow is thinking too. The man is thinking to himself at first, these days I hardly have time to wonder, he thinks, almost saying the words aloud. The man thinks, the boy enters my life as well, just as he did 1,000 years ago. The crow is thinking, the man is thinking too much. The boy followed the whole way, the man thinks, standing at his cliff's mouth, studying the movement of crows outside, again seeing the figure of the one-eyed boy with burning wings. It is curious, he thinks. The albino crow is curious too. The dark crow leaves the flock and lands at the cave's mouth. Alongside the boy through the snows trudged the monk Mika, who was without hands, Sisto, who was himself blind, Ezekiel, the prophet of lament and vision, Virgil, the sleepy one, and Himpus, the Zen master. These were the monks we studied with 1,000 years ago. The man sees the albino crow has also landed. And now he thinks to himself, who were these monks who came with the boy so many lifetimes ago? Naturally, the albino crow wants to tell him. So the dark crow pecks his beak against the stone. The crow says, did you forget the man who pulled a chair behind the boy through the snows of winter? Was I that man? The man thinks, looking down on the crow's strange whiteness as he wonders if the crows want to come inside the cave.
I'm going to read now from a book called Remission, which was written after I was kind of better from almost dying from cancer. I'm going to read 2 poems from here. Nothing, it's actually not about cancer, it's just, had to have a title. Nothing supports anything. Convergence in corners converges. Grace is groundedness. Fluxed scuff shines brighter than bile, left out in rain and snow. Enclosure and opening, as closure is a beginning. Scars shine and scratches cower. Left of absolute center, another center, gravity. A threat, defiance, a gesture of optimism, landlocked horizon, no boats, no waves, as if we had never been airborne or never pinned our hopes on some dream of sky. In earth to earth transcendence, transmittal is elemental. Decline descends, blinds fold, years flap, not collapsing but could. Anything supports nothing. Temporality, a myth. Impermanence, real. Transit, gone. Just a hint of a future. Push it forward. And then I'm going to read a love poem for Patricia. Depth now, in place of time, surely depth. Not the harsh wind blowing the snow across the path, but the sun melting the whirling flakes in mid-flight. We collect without collecting, hold precious what some would think fool's gold. We utter each other's words and thoughts, anticipate movement, uncover desire in a glance, or your arm in mine. We know that time does not make poems, that feeling truly is first, and that struggle becomes a gift. And we know at the last hour, we will hop a rumbling freight train, share an orange on a San Francisco hill. Okay, thank you. Get to the hill.
What's most on your mind right now? What's real for you? The most prominent in your speaking, the speaking itself, an act of imagination, and not what you usually say to the others about yourself. You can stay silent or speak, but please stay a little longer. And don't judge this moment when we again find one another. We are never alone. A letter of introduction from Hokai by Head Monk Zoshan, a friend of our temple sweeper, the 11th month of the 9th century of our second millennium, the 77th year. The words you just heard between the mute girl and the one-eyed boy, as well as those from her diary, were the last the temple sweeper spoke to me on the night of his death. I'm not sure why he spoke them, or of their sayings and stories. These fragments he spoke as if dropping pebbles along this very shore. The notes that follow are my own tonight to the child he called the mute girl in these scrolls, right up to and with his last breath. Nor am I sure as to why he transmitted these last utterance in ink drawings to me up until his final night. He was a quiet man, and though we lived for many years together in the monastery, he conversed on few occasions, and then only by sheer necessity. I would see him out by the sea, or sweeping the halls of our monastery, and often I wondered how he gripped the broom so sturdily, as he had few fingers. Still, he would work the fields of our small island side by side, and he was a good worker. Many of the monks considered that he had been reincarnated from the spirit of a fox. For as Master Bajang said of our karma, he is not blind to cause and effect. I did as he requested and wrote these letters, stories, sayings, and poems during the last months leading up to his death. Eventually, he even had me write down my own words, and I've included them alongside the maps and old drawings he gave me that winter. It was a harsh season for us all, full of storms on the shores of our small hermitage in the sea. Let me say that from the beginning, I secretly admired our temple sweeper, his vow of silence before he came to me. He was always first into the meditation hall, and he could be found there late at nights as well, sitting cross-legged when most of us were in our cells, sleeping. I should tell you that it was I who named the archival records that he spoke, and I have done my best to assure nothing was left out. During those final nights and weeks together, he referred often to the girl's diary, to the autobiography of a dream, as he called it, and on some occasions he became quite animated. And at occasions he became quite animated about this or that, and the evening's discussions that he called part of the essential story. Then on occasion, even often, it could be said, he would talk of the circus players and theater troupe and some curious film crew he had brought him to our monastery. Though it should be noted, as I was still a boy myself when the temple sweeper arrived here, I can add nothing to these accounts and instructions other than to affirm that the older monks have told me that he was, indeed, brought by boat on our owl by a group of unknown people in strange clothes, who immediately abandoned him on the shore. And alas, as it was often late and our conversations would carry on for hours in the dark, I have inevitably failed him in some way. Once the abbot asked him to be the head monk among us. On another occasion, in front of the whole assembly, the abbot demanded he come forward and become a priest. Yet among us, he remained the temple sweeper. I should point out that it was clear in his last year he was very sick. His left eye had begun to swell again, and his hands had a serious tremble that he tried to hide. On more than one occasion, I asked him to see a shaman. I even offered to navigate our small boat to the mainland so that he could see a doctor. The abbot had even approved this request, as he himself had taken the temple sweeper to see our shaman after he had first arrived in the temple as a boy. For as I've been told, the condition of his hands and eye frightened the others. He refused me, of course, for fear of forfeiting our secrecy for that of his own self, our first thought. Now I understand it's not always so, for he was ready to leave the dream. His teeth were brown, he ate less, and had trouble seeing his way through the garden to the cemetery path, where he walked to the sea every day for 25 years, with his tied bundle of stones and bags of pebbles over his shoulder.
I'll read a couple poems from a book that I actually wrote in French that Patricia translated. So keep the Patricia thing going pretty strongly. This is a series of 10, it's called 10 Meditations on some words of Antoine Artaud. And I'll read, just read two of them. The titles are all taken from Artaud's last notebooks, those notebooks. I will keep to myself only what they have never wanted. A few sayings placed judiciously in the discourse allows us a profound inquisition. From time to time, in order to catch our breath, we invoke God or Satan, or a twilight more red than russet. Be patient, my little ones. I come with dirty hands to redeem the possibility of crowning a horned god covered in weighty cinders. I guess I'd read it in French too. Je ne garderai que s'ils n'auront jamais voulu. Quelques proverbes placés judicieusement dans le discours nous permettent une inquisition profonde. De temps à autre, pour répondre au souffle, on évoque Dieu ou Satan, ou un crépuscule rouge, plutôt que roux. Soyez patients, mes petits, je viens avec mes maçons pour sauver les possibilités de couronner un Dieu connu drapé de sang d'autrui. and I'll read one more. This is called Now is the Moment of the Completion of the Other. C'est le moment de la complétude de l'autre. Comme si le chien sur le champ venant rendre le feu. Comme si le danseur sur scène venait rendre content. Comme si la poire sur la table venait rendre sage. Now is the moment of the completion of the other, as if the dog in the grass can make us strong, as if the dancer on the stage can make us content, as if the pear on the table can make us wise.
Would you read a couple more
Sure.
papers? I think that's,
Okay, I'm going to read some John. Though he always remained a stranger among us, the abbot had eventually accepted his silence and even encouraged it when the monks on occasion tried to trick him with words. This was his path in life, on this forlorn, even if beautiful hidden isle, to proceed without words. As I was only a small boy when he first washed ashore with the circus people from the mainland, I cannot say for certain of his age. But the elders told me he arrived old and that he sang Tangario meditation outside the monastery gate after his friends sailed away for 21 days without so much as a quiver before the monks finally opened the gates and took him in. They taunted him and even poured buckets of water on his head in that winter as he sat these first 21 days outside the temple gates, but he would not move from his lotus position. As for myself, I studied his practice for many years, his invisible shuffle down the shallowed halls, his continuous bowing after the others left the dining quarters, the graves he dug and filled with stones on the cliff by the sea, his weeping in the Buddha hall, almost inaudible, but I could hear him. So these words he at last spoke, I confess, I awaited them with great curiosity and even joy. At first I thought it strange that he spoke of his own life as that of another, and I was startled by his wanderings with the one-eyed boy and mute girl, and the spirits of both animals and men. His translations of the mute girl's diary remain in my own dreams even to this day. But then I began to feel that all of the past, including history and the imaginary world of men, was nothing but a dream to our temple sweeper. When the third full moon before his death appeared, he came to my cell. I saw him standing before me without his robe, just a sheet draped around his body and shivering there like a ghost, with only the dimmed widow light of the sky revealing his face and shattered eye. It was the first time I noticed what I can only describe as a fierce ravage in his sharp, chiseled chin. He was not one of us. He had once been a handsome man, I thought, but now he looked twice the age of the eldest among us. He handed me a sheath of paper on which he had crudely scribbled the words, "Will you help me?" There were purple blotches on his skin, and his hands now shook in the draft of the hall. Later, in his cell, he asked me to bring a box of scrolls from the storage shed. I will add that as I am head monk, I possess the key and did not need to seek jurisdiction to grant this request. It remained our secret. Pick it up. Want me to go again?
whatever you want to do, it's totally, we've agreed we do what we want.
Yeah, we'll do what we want. All right. I'm going to read a few poems from a new sequence that I'm working on, which came about because I've been, over the last, when did we start that project? December? The archive project? My granddaughter Imogene, who did this artwork, also put together my archive for shipping off to University of California. And I found my notebook that I had kept with conversations, mainly conversations, I guess, that I'd had with Roland Jakobsen during the time that I was writing my dissertation. Some were probably from class, but most of them seemed to just be scribbled notes. And I couldn't decipher them particularly, so I decided they were all poems. Homage to Roland Jakobsen. Enchained probabilities create word boundaries of defeated anticipation, where hesitation between sound and sense leads to the inalienable proclamation that any character can create any self-formed message. Conspicuous similarities linger between latent and patent, a vindication, we might say, of flagrant anachronisms. If penultimate constituents of progressive structures are only animate nouns, then each interval exhibits mutually symmetric correspondences. Basic oppositions determine the determiner, underscore the semantic contrast between a bird's chirp and a boat heaving on the waves. Such a realization as this allows us to leave behind the questionable dilemma of the demarcation between something composed and something invented. Premature generalizations do not take into consideration the limited temporality and narrow character of certain phenomena. If silence is a structural property, then inner speech is also speech. Vital questions reappear again and again. Narrative order and consecutive consistency do not make for a synthesis of meaning within the domain of certain conventional notions of understanding. The failure of inconsistency to be consistent often results in insightful or incisive misunderstandings. An artificial chasm exists between the cohesive and allegedly isolated lines. Both convergent and divergent traits are apparent within an otherwise indissoluble combination. Linkage of the two is by no means accidental. Each disjuncture is enshrouded within the brevity and accuracy of a mathematical formula. Here too is an ugly substitute for denigrating the superfluousness of the attempt. Or as Hopkins said before he was Hopkins, the structure of poetry is that of continuous parallelism. But what do we do then with avid circularity, where ellipsis and elliptic implications abound, as in the snake swallowing its tail? I still got a PhD. To you, sir.
I will add that as I am head monk, I possess the key and did not need to seek jurisdiction to grant this request. It remained our secret. At first I was quite certain that this was the reason he came to me and not to one of the others. Though gradually he revealed our relationship, and his speaking in this way was no accident. Of course, it is I alone who could supply the paper on which his scrolls are now written by my own hand. Do not take it wrongly when I tell you that the Temple Sweeper had no friends, at least not in the sense that he shared his life with the brothers. That night, and for 3 full moons thereafter, he spoke. His voice was strong and sure, and not like the body that leaned over the desk in my cell to assure that I had left nothing out. At first I thought of the words as some kind of confession, but now I see it as not always so. There is no doubt that he loved the one he called the mute girl with all of his being, and in spite of all, his life was that of a great love story. That is why we monks, who live in the absence of romantic love, and now love him so. Often as he spoke, it was if he had forgotten certain phrases, particularly verbs, or how to use the sound of them, some turmoil would appear on his withered brow. He would rub his unshaven head, and he would then begin to speak in other languages, which were foreign to me. I have done what I could, as well as taken the liberty to categorize these scrolls as seemed most appropriate to me as his scribe. For alas, the temple sweeper left his body before the work.
Insistence. That would be great.
Insistence. Mute rock must become massive, a mountain, or multiple, an outcropping, to be heard at all. And such mass, a trace of some insistence is visible. An insistence on speech. A matter of placement, of form. There is no justification for this. What about the pebble in your shoe? She took up collecting rocks for a wall she wished to build, and planted Sweet William where it will grow.
A number of years ago, 2002, Bill Corbett published Chapbook of Patrician's Windows, and of course Bill is no longer with us either. I was able to snag these copies from SPD for the postage. Anybody who wants one, please take one. I would be happy to disseminate Windows into the world. So, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
you guys have been a great.
I've lost Imogene, but
Oh, she went to different.
oh, okay. Please take a moment to look at her pictures that are up on the walls here, and we will. Here she comes. One moment, please. Help her with the door. It's open.
I had a
Oh!
hard time figuring it out too.
It's a test.
No, she
We're talking about you while you're away.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you. That's Imogene Pruitt-Spence Pruitt back there, and just Pruitt-Spence. Just right there. Pruitt-Spence. I had a poster for your grandfather that actually put his name backwards to your first
Yes, you
reading
did,
word of mouth. You know.
with Fanny.
Yes, exactly. You
And
know.
who pointed it out? Fanny.
Of course. Anyhow, Imogene, thank you so much for giving us these pictures to look at. You know, it's wonderful to have them up here. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you all
Pull
very
your
much.
chairs up, have some food, have some wine. There's no rush to go anywhere, so please enjoy the rest of the
And the sun
afternoon.
has come out.
Thank you
Isn't
both.
that something?
Yeah.
It's Patricia. It's Patricia
Oh, the great
visiting.
sweeping shadows that kept flipping up here. I was like,
Yeah, I know.
holy crap.
I know.
I think the little questions.
If I were a cat, I would be like,
I've still got, okay. As an archivist.